Welcome to our second scatter plot tutorial. So you should already have a few things on your scatter plot. We will be using the same exact one from prep materials last week. So we have our title already on here. We have our X and our Y axis labels in some nicely centered data. So now we are going to add on a little bit to this. So right now we just have a plain scatter plot, but we don't really have any sort of analysis. So in order to add that, so we can tell how good is our relationship, how strong is our linear relationship between our two variables, we're going to add a couple things. So I'm going to make sure I'm highlighted on my graph. I'm going to go up into this chart design tab. And then I'm going to go back to this very familiar add chart element. This will be your friend. Most of the things that we do to add is in this add chart element. So what I want to add is a trend line. I want to see how close my data is fitting to a linear trend line. So I'm going to select that. But that's not all I want to add. So I want to go back to this trend line and select more trend line options. Once I do that, I have this box in my right-hand side of my screen pop up. I have linear selected, and I want to add a couple more things. So I want to make sure I display the equation on my chart, and I display my R-squared value. So those are doing two things for me. This first equation at the top here, to make this a little bigger, make this a little bigger, so it's much easier for us to see. This first equation here is telling me what this line is. If you remember y equals mx plus b, that familiar equation, that is what is describing our line. So we have our y, which our y is this axis here, equal to some slope. So that m, that from that equation y equals mx plus b, that is this 41. That's our slope, or our m, multiplied by our x value, subtracting this really crazy number. So this really crazy number is actually our y-intercept. So if you remember that equation, y equals, oh, let me go to our other pen. Yeah, so if we go to our familiar equation, y equals our m, or our slope, x, plus b, which b is our y-intercept. This is what is always going to be displayed for this equation. This is just describing our trend line, describing this line right here. Now this equation, this general form here or the specific form here, this allows us to estimate numbers outside of this range. So if I wondered how many cats would be predicted to be adopted in the year 2025, I could use this equation, this y equals 41.08x minus 81,631 to predict those numbers of cats that would be adopted. And that is the purpose of our equation. Now our r squared, our second value here, this shows us how closely our data matches this line. So I can see that I have some points here. They're pretty close to the line, but they're not exactly on this trend line. If all my points fell exactly on this trend line, then I would have an r squared equal to 1. But mine is just under 1 at 0.92, so that still means I have a strong correlation. It's a strong positive correlation with that r squared value of 0.9. So now on your graph, you should have several items. You should have your title, you should have your y and x label, You should have a trend line, this dotted line straight through your points, your equation of the line that describes your trend line, and your R squared value. Once you've completed this graph, take a picture and upload it to your worksheets.